and verse 21. So Proverbs 28 and verse 21 is where we're going to get started. Let me get over there. There we go. So Proverbs 28, and we're going to pick up reading in verse number 21. So Proverbs 28, verse 21. And if I'm looking up all the time, I'm looking at that spot. So it's getting wetter. Yes, and I've taken a picture. I'll get over to the landlords, but I have to keep watching that thing for it to start dripping. But Proverbs chapter 28. And again, we're talking about our observation on the impious. This chapter is how we are looking at it. And starting verse 21, we read this: He that delicately bringeth up his servant from a... Nope, that's 29. Never mind. To have respect of persons. Here's 28:21. To have respect of persons is not good. For a piece of bread that man will transgress. So basically here you have this idea that when you have respects of person, and what we're talking about there is that, you treat the rich differently than you treat the poor. You treat the influential more different than you treat the common man. So you have respect of person. You have a different set of rules you play by for each type of person that you encounter, depending upon their social or economic or religious standing. And so it says that a man to have respect of person is not good. Okay, why is it not good? Because just for a piece of bread you'll transgress. Okay, in other words, for the slightest thing, okay, you will compromise your principles. You've basically compromised your principles, just creating that strata of influence, But you will definitely compromise your principles, because if you deem this person more valuable than you deem this person, okay, then you will mistreat this person and you will over-honor this person, okay? So it's really easy when you have that strata. Everybody, again, respecting a position, especially one that's God ordained and given. I don't think that's what this is talking about here. But respecting an individual because he comes from a certain pedigree. Okay. For instance, we're always fascinated in what the royals are up to. That long line of inbreeding that's taking place. But at least they're getting some new blood in now. But and to look at the fact that this monarchy has lasted as long as it has, right, and morphs itself to become relevant to new periods of time in order to keep on. In fact, historical analysis says that based upon the heir apparent, that the monarchy will continue to go on for quite some time because it adapts. It changes its functions, finds its relevance in modern society. But essentially, that's because over time in their culture, okay, even though people want a monarchy, okay, the individuals that fulfill the role aren't looked at as divine. They're not looked at as infallible. Okay? They're not looked at as better than everybody else just because they were born into that position, and they relegated it down to simply a position. Now, they may inherit it, okay? But then again, those sitting in the House of Lords inherit their position too, by the way. And it's only the House of Commons that people are voted in there. Everything else is inherited. But over time, what's happened is the people they don't see the people as holding the position is all that special. They have to earn the respect. They have to earn the admiration. They have to do something to be relevant. Just having a crown set on your head isn't that big a deal anymore. Okay, what are you going to do with that crown? What improvements are you going to make? How are you going to take your influence and use it for the betterment of everybody? So you got to play with that and do that. But for a long time, monarchs were just almost considered infallible. They were God gifts to man, and they thought themselves God's gifts to man. But again, if one reads the scripture, when the monarchy of Israel was being set up with Saul, God gave specific instructions on what kind of a person should hold that position, what that person would be expected to do, and what he would not be allowed to do, what God did not want to see him do. Of course, Saul and Solomon all blew it, But at the same time, God never intended for kings to be special people. He intended them to be shepherds. But here's what happens is, because there's this one thing when you have people who think more of themselves than what they are. But when it really gets dangerous is when others think more of that person than what they are. And they have respect of persons. Okay? And when we start doing that, it will lead to compromise. Proverbs 24:23, these things also belong to the wise. It is not good to have respect of persons in judgment. Okay? In other words, if you're a judge, you better not have respect of persons. You better not treat this guy because he lives in this side of town differently than you treat this guy over here who lives, maybe doesn't even have an address. Okay? Because when you start doing that, you will start compromising. And I've seen judges, retired judges, make statements like, we all knew who we could touch and who we couldn't touch in that community. See? But that's led to people complain about our legal system. Well, there's the rot in the legal system. What do they say a lot on the news nowadays? There's a two-tier justice system. I don't know that. Well, it is true. I don't know who's to blame for it. But it's when you start having respect of persons. We'll throw the book at this guy or girl or woman, but these over here will deal with a little light touch. But yet it's the same, as far as we know, it's the same crime, essentially. I'm always of the event that there's information we don't have that may make the two different things a little different. But nevertheless, we just can't do that. Okay? Everybody has to be treated the same. And otherwise it leads to compromise. Verse 22, he that hasteth to be rich, we're back to that, hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. So once again, hasting to be rich. You just see this over and over again. God just be patient. Don't be in a rush. God doesn't have a problem with people being rich. Okay? But there's something God condemns about someone who wants to be rich or hastes to be rich. Okay? And every time you find that expression, as we mentioned it before, it has something to do with the fact that you're willing, there's nothing that you're not willing to do in order to acquire those riches. So you haste. You have no principles guiding that. And unfortunately, all the time we're being bombarded with the idea of getting rich quick, finding a fast way to make a buck and to get somewhere. I was privy to a conversation that went on between a man and his wife, and the wife had seen something, I guess, on television or the internet or whatever those things, and where you buy into this particular product or invest in this particular stock, and it's guaranteed to get your money back, if you do that. And this person mentioned the fact that this well-known political person was endorsing this product, so it had to be a good product, And the person, the husband on the other end of the phone, very wisely says, well, you don't know that person is actually endorsing anymore with AI. It could be a fake, Let's just pray about it. Let's take our time. And again, I'm not trying to throw anybody on their bus, but just saying the wife was really wanting to do this. And the husband was very, very cautious about doing this because it'd been a fast turnaround and surefire. There's no such thing as gold. May have never been worth nothing, but it has been worth less than what it currently is worth. It does go down in value. True, it may not be worth zero, but it does go down in value. So there's no surefire thing. Okay? Outside of trusting in God, you can trust in God, and it's a surefire thing. God will take care of you. Doesn't mean He necessarily lets you live in one of the big old houses going north on Eubank that look like hotels. But it doesn't mean that He won't keep a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and food on your table, and you know what I'm saying? Keep you moving. He'll take care of you. But we have to always remember this, that God's not trying to build an empire on this earth. Okay? He's not trying, you know what I'm saying? There's better things coming. He's not worried about your portfolio, your retirement, your IRA and your 401k and all that. He's not worried about that because there is no retirement out of his labor. There will come a time for each of us that will be so old and feeble that the companies we work for won't want us to work for them anymore, possibly. You know? And we might do things in order to try and prepare for those times when we don't have gainful employment. Okay? My new company has enrolled us all in a 401k, whether we like it or not. And, well, we can opt out of it, but it's an automatic thing. And so, not that it'll be worth much at my age by the time I can get to retirement, but who knows? Who knows? But at the same, do what? It adds up. It adds up. It can go down too. I've seen that happen. I've seen everybody living off of 401k having to go back to work. I've seen that happen too. That's why you just trust in the Lord. You just trust in the Lord, which is the opposite of this get rich quick. Okay, so he that hastens to be rich. What ultimately does God say here in verse 21, verse 22, that will happen? He that hastens to be rich hath an evil eye. Okay, in other words, he's covetous. He has an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. By the way, poverty doesn't necessarily mean he loses his money. And how many times have God says you have fatness to your flesh, but leanness to your soul? Okay, there's more ways. There's more poverty than just fiscal poverty. And I'd rather have a small wallet and a fat soul, you know, that's blessed and rich with walking with the Lord, than the other way around. Okay, and because if money is the answer to all of life's problems, as some people think it is, you tell me why the rich have so many problems. Okay, if it's security, if having finance, I know you. If having finances is security, then how come they have to build walls and get dogs and security systems? And if it's so, you know what I'm saying? What it just leads to anxieties and fear and insecurities and it breaks up relationships. Because now the person with the money is suspicious of anybody trying to have a relationship with them. They just want their money, right? A lot of times people only have a relationship with them in order to get a slice of the money. And so you have all this, and it just destroys so many things. But poverty comes to them. Verse 23, he that rebuketh a man afterwards shall find more favor than he that flattereth with the tongue. He that rebuketh a man afterwards shall find more favor than he that flattereth with his tongue. See, sometimes, I'm sorry, but I just think standing here, that heat kicks on, it gets oppressive. It's like having a hairdryer blowing in your face. You guys may be comfortable, but for me, it's like, you're not comfortable either. It's hitting you too. It's like a wall that just slowly descends. Oh, yeah. It just slowly descends, and the next thing you know, you're just like, whoo, like I'm sweating up here. Whoo. But now this is a very important thing, because there's a difference. Paying someone a compliment is one thing, flattery is another. Okay? Making an honest observation about something that you believe is a positive attribute about an individual or the outcome of a particular service that they performed, that's encouraging someone. But one can easily slip over from that into flattery, which is empty praise that is meant to manipulate. Okay? This week I won an award. Or was it last week? It was last week. I won an award at work. Oh, it's about the 6th, 7th time I've won it. But no, just kidding. But but I won this award. But of all the awards, every time I won this reward, there has been none that was as flowery and flattery as this thing was. It was way over the top. And I'm sitting there, like I was sitting there working, and a coworker comes in clapping, congratulations, I'm like, for what? Because I hadn't read the circular for that week. And he goes, oh, look at that, look at the thing. So I looked it up, and I looked down there, and I'm like, I really think, I'm like, somebody used Chat GBT. I'm like, this is just way over. Wow. All right. And so in this case, I know it's not manipulation because this person is leaving the company at the end of the month. So, but nevertheless, it was just way over the top. I mean, I don't mind if someone walks in and makes an observation. That helped me, Okay. Because I've learned that today's heroes are tomorrow's villains. Okay. And today they're singing your praises, and tomorrow they're planning your execution. Okay. Because people's attitudes flip all the time. And you have to do what you do because it's right to do, regardless of whether someone likes it or someone hates it. Because you're always going to find that the attitude's going to change. So you can't depend upon the praise or even the criticism of people to determine your own value. Okay? You have to determine it by your principles. Have I done the best that I can do? Not that I am the best, but I've done the best that I can do. And if that's not good enough, okay, then you have every right to not use my services. But I have done the best that I can do. And I'm not going to hold any hard feelings against someone who just says, you're sorry, but your best just isn't good enough. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm doing my best, But also you have the other side of things where you just did your best and someone acts like, that you were born of a virgin in a manger in fulfillment of prophecy. It's like, okay, no, I don't think so. And there's some people, you just learn that they use flattery as a science. And you really have to learn to just disregard 99.9% of everything they say and get right down to the nuts and bolts to see what they're asking you to do. Because otherwise they're trying to, and that's their goal. They try to manipulate, that they flatter. And this is what he's saying here, verse 20, he that rebuketh a man afterwards shall find more favor than he that flattereth with his tongue. It's better that you shoot straight, be honest. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to be insulting, but be honest, than to turn around and flatter someone. Okay, it's better to walk in and say, well, I appreciate all your hard work, but it didn't actually turn out quite right. There's some areas we could improve on, Now, you may get a response like I get out of the Generation Zers. Ouch. That hurts. Like, I'm just trying to tell you, we can do a better job. Okay. Because it's better that than pretend like they're something that they're not, or even pretend like I had a meeting with a lady the other day, and I was trying to describe the work atmosphere we're trying to build. And I said, I told one of my colleagues, I said, it's okay to make a mistake. You're going to find that you'll make a mistake, but 99% of the mistakes will be mine. It's okay to make a mistake. Okay? Well, if you spill the milk, I'll go get the mop. If I spill the milk, you go get the mop. It's going to be okay. She laughed when I said 99% of the mistakes would be mine. But I honestly look at it that way. I'm going to make mistakes. It's okay. Tell me I made a mistake. I'm all right with that. I'd rather have you tell me I made a mistake than to flatter me. When I hear flattery, and how do you know flattery? Because I know what I am. Okay, I know what I'm capable of, and I know what I'm not capable of. When I hear flattery, all I hear is that sound you hear when you're out walking somewhere you shouldn't be, and you come upon a creature that really isn't that friendly, and you suddenly hear that. When flattery starts coming my way, it literally to me sounds like a rattlesnake. When's the bite about to happen? I'm about to be bit. And so anytime I hear the flattery, it's like, just be honest. And I think everybody appreciates honesty at the end of the day. Okay, you may be a little low one day and you appreciate the over compliments, but we have to be careful because complimenting someone can lead into flattery pretty quick. And compromise, and that flattery is a very dangerous thing. We should never use flattery to gain what we need. We should trust the Lord. So, but if you don't butter them up, how are you going to get what you want? I'll just pray. I'll pray and be honest. Because at the end of the day, God can manipulate the hearts of everybody. Okay, God can turn the heart of the king any which way He wants. That's what He's promised, isn't it? The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and He turns it as the rivers of water. He turns it. So why do I need to flatter anybody? All I have to do is talk to the Lord. And by the way, you can't flatter God because there's nothing you can say good about Him that isn't true. And by the fact, we barely scrape the surface of just how incredibly good God is. Okay? So the best thing is to throw, it's not flattery when you're telling God, that's praise. When you're bragging on God to God, that's just praise. Okay? Because you're not going to manipulate God into doing something that violates His principles. It's impossible. So you can brag on God, tell the truth all you want to, like I said, and we won't even tell the truth even to the 10th of what it is about God. And that's why I always say prayer, one of the things I've learned about prayer in my life is to be honest. Just be absolutely honest. And I've heard those people pray who sprinkle stardust and tickle the toes of the angels, and it's the biggest flowery, it's beautiful sounding. Oh my goodness, That's why I think that books of prayer, are not necessarily the best. They're good poetry, but at the same time, I think using them as prayer versus just talking to God and being honest with God, okay, I think is verging on us trying to flatter God, because we'll rattle off these lines of poetry as prayer, thinking that somehow they will push God's button and get God to do something, okay, because we rattled off this little book of prayers, And again, I've read through the Anglican book of prayers and stuff like that. And by the way, when that thing came out, many preachers stood up against that thing because it violates the very concept of what prayer is, which is us having a conversation with God and just being honest with God. I think, though you cannot manipulate God, I think you can attempt it when you're angry, disappointed, and yet you're talking to God as if everything's okay. Inside, you're tied in knots, but yet you're talking to God like you like everything that's happened. You do realize you can't lie to Him, right? I mean, you do realize He hears it for what it is, because He hears what's in your heart. He sees what's coming out of your lips. And this is why even Jesus said, you draw nigh to me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. So the best thing to do is when you're upset with something that's happened in your world, is you just let it out. Don't let it out in front of other people. Let it out in front of God. You're not going to hurt God's feelings. He already knows what's on the inside. He already knows it's there. It's best to get it out there, put it on the table, and let God show you the truth of what you're feeling. Let God turn around and go, okay. It reminds me of that episode of Andy Griffith with the spoilt kid. Anybody watch Andy Griffith? With the spoilt kid? Not everybody's cup of tea. But at the same time, there's this episode where his son, Opie, meets this kid, okay? And he's a spoilt kid. And he thinks his relationship with his father is based upon him throwing tantrums, making threats, and his father buys him things, And so Opie has to work. He has to take out the trash, he has to do things, and then his dad pays him a little something or other, in order, which I'm sure was a lot of money back then, like a nickel or something like that. If he does this list of chores around the house, his dad will give him a nickel or 25 cents or whatever it was. And the little bratty boy is like, why do you don't, allowance is what you get for just being a kid. You shouldn't have to do anything for it. And so he begins to show Opie how he gets things out of his dad. So Opie, being a bright young kid, okay, begins to try and ask questions. Because, well, when I have problems and I don't understand something, I just sit down and talk with my pa, and we just talk things out, man to man. And then the bratty kid goes, let me ask you something, Ope. Have you ever won any of those arguments? He goes, no. He goes, mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. But it didn't work when Opie tried to be a brat. It didn't affect his dad at all. Matter of fact, it was one of the funniest scenes in the film. Opie comes in and, Dad, I think that I should get more money, a week than my nickel. And his dad's like, is that so? He goes, yeah, because kids that live in the big town, they get more than that. He goes, well, you ain't living in the big town, are you? He goes, well, but I don't think I should be doing anything. Well, I think you should. And he goes down there. He goes, so then he starts the tantrum part, and he starts screaming, ah! He goes, oh, what you doing? I'm screaming. Good for the lungs. Then he starts getting on the floor, stomping, boom, 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 boom. What are you doing? I'm throwing a tantrum. Well, don't get your shirt dirty. And he goes through this, and then finally gets to the point where he yells at his dad and says, that's not fair. He screams at his dad. Well, that's the end of the playtime. Okay? And Dad turns around. Don't you wish I knew my Bible this well? And Dad turns around and he begins to lay out the law to this little boy. I'm your daddy, and I say you're going to get a nickel for doing this my work. And if you don't want to do the work to get the nickel, then how about we just don't give you the nickel? Things went all the way back on him. I bring this up to simply say this. Yeah, it's true. You're honest before God, okay, like Opie. How many of those conversations have you ever won? But the relationship's good, isn't it? Because sometimes we as kids just don't get what's going on, do we? We think we know what's going on. We think we know how things are supposed to turn out. We think we know what's beneficial and detrimental to the cause. But there's only one who really understands it, and that's God. But until we're honest and we open up and we have one of them conversations with Paul, where we let loose our emotions and let loose our frustrations to him, how's he supposed to help us work through them? To where we understand, okay, what's going on, why he is allowing this to happen in our world, okay, either to us directly or to someone that we love or a cause that we're invested in. How do we know until we are honest? See? But does it do any good to throw a tantrum to God? You think you're going to get anything by throwing a tantrum at God? I'll hold my breath. Not as long as God can hold his will. You know what I'm saying? You're never going to accomplish that, but neither are you going to flatter him. Neither are you going to pretend like you're good with everything that's going on when you're not. Okay? And it's best just to get before God and just tell him the truth of what you feel. And I know I've given illustrations. This is illustration 547. But when I was administering in college, this is one of the greatest lessons I believe I taught the students when they had problems with God. And I would tell them, have you opened up and just been honest with him about how you feel? You're opening up. Isn't it amazing? You're opening up telling me, and I can't do anything about it. I didn't do anything to do it, to create this situation in your world. I can't do anything to change this situation in your world. And yet you're being in here perfectly honest with me. Have you thought about being that honest with God? And I love their responses. You can't talk to God like that. Oh, so you can gossip about God to me, but you can't actually tell God how you feel. And I told you the story, this is the 500th one, where I told the guy, I'm going to leave my office. I'm going to shut the door behind me, and you're going to be honest with God. And I'm not coming back in this office till I see the door open. You stay in here until you get honest with God. Because I know this. I know this. Every time I'm honest with God, which leads me to be more to remember that when I go to prayer, that if I don't like something that's going on, to be honest with him. Because I know this, one of two things always happens. Never a third thing, just one or two things. The majority of the time, he shows me where I'm wrong. He fixes me. But then there is those times where I'm right. And he fixes the situation that, as I see it, needs to be fixed. And by the way, it doesn't mean that God didn't see that it needed to be fixed that way. ahead of time. He just needed me to come before him and lay out my grievances and allow him to be the judge of the matter. And you just don't get nowhere flattering God. And we shouldn't even try to get anywhere flattering people, but you're definitely going to get nowhere flattering God. And let's look at the verse 24. Whoso robbeth his father or his mother and saith, it is no transgression, the same is the companion of a destroyer. Woo, there's some harsh words, isn't it? Whoso robbeth his father or his mother and saith, it is no transgression, the same is the companion of a destroyer. You know, this verse creates a lot of interesting dynamics in the family. Okay? It establishes that mom and dad own something that doesn't belong to the kids. Let that sink in. It establishes that mom and dad own something, right? You can't rob mom and dad. A kid couldn't rob mom and dad if God looked at it and said, well, they're your kids, so whatever you got belongs to them. Obviously, that's not how God looks at it, is it? God says, you can rob. Well, if you can rob them, then that means they have possessions that don't belong to you just because you're their kid. You ever seen those kids who think that everything their parents own is automatically theirs and get upset if they don't get it? You know? They think that everything mom and dad has is just automatically theirs, whether they've contributed to the acquisition of it or not. It's theirs. And therefore, they're owed it because it's theirs. Well, according to this scripture alone, God clearly divides up who owns what. This one father, his son got a little snotty with him. And I was privy to not to the event, but the follow-up afterwards. After everything had been rectified and set right, they shared the conversation with me. The son got a little snarky with his dad. You know, he's manning up, standing up to his dad, you know. And dad's like, excuse me? Because that's right. I'm going to take my things and I'm out of here. Your things. You understand we're not talking about 22-year-old. We're talking about kids still well. And dad says, okay, you can have everything you've bought. Everything I've bought's mine. And everything you've bought's yours. So the dad went into the kid's bedroom, took out all the furniture, went into the closet, took all the clothes, left the clothes on the kid's back as a gift. Took it all, stored it in the closet, and the kid walks. This is why the kid was out. Kid walks in the door, his room's bare. He got no clothes in the closet. He's got no bed. He got nothing. Where's all my stuff? He starts screaming. And dad says, I'm going to give you the clothes you have on your back because I don't want to see you walking around naked. But everything else you have, I bought, so it's mine. So if you want to leave with all your things, you go right on ahead. Well, this was a sobering reality to this young man to realize how little he actually possessed compared to how much his parents possessed. And his dad was like, this house, it's mine and your mother's. I let you live here. That furniture in your bedroom, that's mine and your mother's. We let you use it as our son. Those clothes that were in your closet, those are mine and your mother's. We let you wear them because we don't want to see you walking around naked. The food you ate is mine and your mother's. But we don't want to see you starve, so we feed you. It's the truth, isn't it? At the end of the day, who earned the money and who bought it? But when a kid crosses over the line thinking that everything their mom and dad earned and bought and saved is now theirs just automatically because I exist and therefore I get, have really crossed over into this thing of robbery. They're taking it from their parents. I mean, we think of this That's something one of my cousins did one time when he got into his mama's purse and took money out of her purse to go down to the store and get something that he wanted to get. And mama wouldn't give him money to get. I'm going to tell you, I'm here as a witness today to tell you that candy bar was not worth what he got when he got home. And it cost him a lot more than that money. But honestly, to me, that was a scary thing when he did that, because I would have never dreamed of getting into my mom's purse to get anything that was in my mom's. I don't even get into her purse. I have no idea what's in her purses. Okay. I don't know. I don't look. Okay. For all I know, she could have $1 million in rolls in there. I would never know, because I don't. She's laughing like, I wish I would know she had them in, because I'd be able to tell by the things that were coming into the house. But at the same time, I don't. But to me, that was just, what are you doing? You know. But that's because I got the lecture from the beginning that all the things that I had and ate were by God's grace. It was, but by Dad's grace. Not because I necessarily earned it and they were mine. Okay. When I left to go to college, I took very, very little with me. Then I got a job. Then I started earning money. Then I started buying things and acquiring things. And so, but I see kids I say kids, they're grown adults now, but they have this attitude, everything their parents has is theirs. They can go and take it and get it, and anytime they want to, they can go. And we wonder why everybody's going into socialism. Because we haven't stratified life to realize, no, that's not yours. Did you buy it? Was it gifted? I mean, how is it yours? And they literally developed this attitude of, you can't tell me no. I'm your kid. You have to do that for me. Maybe I'm singing a song that's just not meant to be sung in our day and time. I don't know. But can I tell you something? We'd have a lot less spoilt kids if they truly understood the economics of the world. If you didn't earn it, it ain't yours. If you got it given to you, you should be grateful for the fact it was gifted to you. But at the end of the day, somewhere in here we need to get back to stratifying. It's like employees go to work and think they own everything. It's like, no, the boss owns this. That's his paper clip. That's his stapler. Well, not the ones I used. I bought those and brought those myself. But but that's his computer, right? That's his telephone. That's his desk. That's his carpet. That's his ceiling tile. So that doesn't sound right. It's the absolute truth. You don't own that copy machine. You're not paying the electric bill. You're not, let's get back, right? It's not even your trash can. The pen you wrote with, it's not your pen. Unless you brought your own. Right? Which is why we're supposed to be good stewards of it, because it belongs to somebody else. They purchased it for our use, but not for our waste. They're very kind at work. And I can really say this is because of me. They actually keep Earl Grey and English breakfast tea stocked in the cupboard. And you know who drinks it? The only one who drinks it is me. And yet they keep it stocked in that cupboard. Do you know what happens when I walk in there and I'm out of Earl Grey or English breakfast tea? You know what I do? I go down and buy some at the store, bring it back, and put it up in the shelf. You say, why? They should buy that for you. No, they shouldn't. I drank through theirs. Now I'm putting it back. People think that's the oddest thing in the world. I'm like, why is it odd? I appreciate the fact that I'm the only one here who drinks this stuff, and yet they keep it. But if they fail to keep it and I want to drink it, I'll just go buy it myself and put it up in there. Because why? Because it's not mine to start with. It was theirs, and they're being very kind to be able to do that for me. To keep a particular tea in a shelf for one dude who drinks it and nobody else drinks it. And let me tell you something. I go through the stuff. I just want you to know. Some days or several cups of Earl Grey before I can get through the stuff I have to go through. And it's very kind of them, and I truly appreciate everything that they do. But at the same time, they don't have to do that. That's just something the boss does very kindly because he knows I like it, and so he keeps it up there. Okay, and I gratefully appreciate it. But I've seen people absolutely throw it, never live and love and fit because they didn't get what they want to drink isn't provided, or they find another way. You know, like for Susan likes to drink bottled water because she can keep track of what she's drinking. To me, that's a frivolous expense on the side of it when water comes out of the tap, but and it's filtered water. But that's how she keeps track of things. So we get the bottled water. Where at work, okay, they kept bottled water in there for a long time, but it gets expensive, right? Then there's all the waste. When they have these two refrigerators that come with these fancy filtration systems in them that you can just, and it's a lot less expensive and a lot less waste. Get you a cup and just fill it up. When they stopped supplying bottled water and went to that, you should have heard the roof raise. It's like, hello, it's not your human right to have bottled water. Okay? You're not paying for it. The company's paying for it. And if the company thinks they can save some money by buying the filters, then they started sabotaging the filters. They go in and turn them off. And so you go, and you wouldn't get anything. And then the poor lady who's in charge of it would have to come back in and go, oh, and she'd turn it back on. And then she put signs up, stop turning off the filters. But that's how people are. It's like, wait a minute. Because they wanted to force the company to go back to buying bottled water instead of that. But that's you know what? That is robbing mom and dad. That's exactly what that is. That's robbing them because you're forcing them to purchase something that they don't have to purchase just because you want it and think you're somehow entitled to it. But in the way a lot of businesses have gone, the way a lot of people are, just like the children are to their parents. Then once again, if you want to take care of your kids and do that all lavishly, that is up to you. Okay? But I think the kid needs to be raised with the attitude of, this is a gift, not a right. And I think when they move into adulthood, then they can determine the difference between what is a gift and what is a right. Okay? Because so many people have lost that concept. Why? Because they don't understand mom and dad have things that aren't theirs. And then when they rob, it says, it's no transgression. Look what it says. The same is a companion of what? Destroyers. You hear people say all the time, our society is just being destroyed. I agree. It is. It's being destroyed by spoiled brats. By people who think they deserve something that they honestly don't deserve. They can't differentiate between that which is a gift and that which is a right. And so therefore, they think anything that was a gift is actually a right. And that if they don't have this, then somehow their rights have been infringed upon. And so what happens is they create an unsustainable way of life that ultimately ends up destroying society. Why? Because they don't want to work for it. They don't want to earn it. They just think I breathe air and therefore I deserve it. And they create something completely unsustainable. I'll give you an example. Personally, I think the concept of and I'll use the term that's used, even though it's probably a little false in the way it's labeled, but universal health care, okay? I actually don't have a problem with that. I don't. I think it was wonderful living in England and being able to go down to the clinic anytime you needed it, or, and getting the health care that, getting looked at without having to worry about, a big doctor's bill coming or having to pay ginormous insurance premiums, or, what I'm saying? I thought it was a fantastic concept. And the original concept, it's not how they present it today, but the original concept was health care at no cost at the time of service. Now, they weren't saying health care at no cost. They were saying health care at no cost at the time of service. In other words, when you went in, you didn't pay a bill as you went out, or you didn't pay a bill as you were going in. If you know what I'm saying? But They weren't so stupid back in the 50s and 60s when they introduced this program in Great Britain to think that it wasn't going to cost anything. And they didn't present it as not costing anything. They just said no cost at the time of service. Because you know what ultimately they had to do? They had to start raising taxes. They had to get the money from someplace. They had to pay the doctors, right? They have to buy the equipment, the medicine, and maintain the buildings and the operating theater. It takes money to do it. Okay? These things don't grow from seeds. It takes money in order to do it. So now you have enormous taxes on everything. On everything. When we were there, that was almost 10 years ago, we were paying the equivalent of $10 a gallon for gasoline. 80 pence on every pound you were putting went to the NHS. Means only 20 pence were going in your tank. No, it really wasn't. But 80 pence was going to pay for the NHS. Then you paid council taxes and VAT, 17% VAT, value added tax. Every time you bought something to the register and they scanned it, they slapped 17% more on it in taxes. Everything. Like I said, then you had council tax and TV tax and everything else. And out of every tax that they had, a chunk of it, usually the majority of it, went to fund the NHS. Plus, if you worked there, they took a chunk out of your check to pay for the NHS. Right? Because they had to have the money somewhere to pay for this thing. It wasn't free. You lived in a society where you paid so much for everything, but yet it still was nice. But can I tell you something? They're going bankrupt because they can't sustain it. It sounds like a great plan. I think it's a brilliant idea. But even in that tiny little island, no bigger than the size of Georgia, okay, they can't financially keep it going. Now, they won't get rid of it. Sort of like the post office. $9 billion in the red, but we're still going to keep the post office open. And so, that's what I read the other day. And but you've got probably $9 billion, a little bit of an exaggeration, I'm sure. But nevertheless, going in the hole, but we're not going to get rid of it. And so nobody's going to get rid of the NHS. They just can't pay for it. And because they can't pay for it, they can't keep doctors. So they're having to import doctors from out of the country. The problem is they bring in all these people, and now they got another problem because they can't pay them enough to afford to have places to live. So now you know what they got to do? They got to build places for the doctors to live. And those things don't grow by seeds either, do they? So more and more money. You see what I'm saying? But I like the concept of it. But I couldn't figure out to this day, and they haven't done it either, how are you going to pay for it all? But why do people get like that? They get like that because they think it's a right. It's my right. I like what one doctor said when he was arguing against it. He goes, so is it your right that when a patient wants treatment, you can barge into my house in the middle of the night, handcuff me as a doctor, drag me out of my bed, drag me out of my house, and take me down to this person and force me to give this person treatment because they have a right to health care? Because when you say they have a right, then you're saying that I can be forced to perform this health care on them as a physician, as a nurse, as a physician's assistant, as a doctor. See, I think it's a brilliant concept. I like the idea of it. I have no idea how you're ever going to be able to pay for it, okay? Nor how you're going to be able to staff it, right? No idea how it can be run because I've never seen it run in a way that actually is fair and equal to everybody. But I think it's a great concept. But I would never force it on somebody because I don't think this is my opinion, I don't think it's a right. I don't think the doctor should be drug out of his house in the middle of the night and, because I have a right to health care. I think it was great having health care at no upfront cost or no cost at the time of services. I didn't like paying 80 pence in taxes on every gallon of gas that I put in my tank. I didn't like having to pay 17% VAT on everything. 17%. Can you imagine going in and seeing your bill go up by 17% as soon as they add taxes to it? What do we got? What's our local tax? Like 7.5%, 8%, something like that. Right? So just imagine. Double that. Double that. Everything you buy. Isn't that incredible? And yet they still don't have the best healthcare system in the world. I'd still compare ours to there any day. Our doctors are better. Our nurses are better. Our medicine's better. It's true. It's true. We had a lady in our church, not our church, one church we served in, who was left out in the hallway on a gurney to die. Because they literally looked at her and said, well, she's 80 years old. She doesn't have a lot of life left. Do we really want to spend the money to treat her when she really isn't going to be able to contribute back to, in taxes to society? And so they left her out on the gurney. It's ripe with corruption, from top to bottom. I like the idea, but the idea came about because someone says, that's my right. Is it? Is it the right of society to have to pay for everybody else's health care? Do we take from mama and daddy and demand? Is that what we do? But that's why it comes down to the last word there. They're a destroyer. As one old preacher said one time, you'll get what you want, but you'll lose what you had. Because you know what we had to end up doing to get good health care over there? We had to go private. We did. We had to go private, which means you spend more. Because you're still getting all your taxes taken out. But we had to go private. And that was nice. I want you to know, they still come to your house with the little black bag. They sit down with you in your house with a little black bag, just the old doctor's bag. It's the most amazing thing. Sit down in there and they take care of you right there in your house. Give you your prescriptions. Take care of everything right there. Found them in the yellow pages, didn't we? So I forget what the company was called. Picked up the phone, called them. Because she got real sick one time over there. She got a hold of something. And we tried to get in the NHS to get her taken care of and couldn't get her in. And so we had an NHS nurse come over to the house and try to deal with the hotline to try and find out what was wrong and couldn't get anywhere. And she goes, she's a Scottish lady, I don't know what to tell you to do. These people don't know what to do. And I'm like, so I pulled out the yellow pages and went, look, what about this? She goes, you might as well try it. Sure enough. Within an hour, there was a guy there standing at my back door, at my front door with his little bag, came inside, sat down, looked her over, and said, well, here's what you need to do. Wrote her a prescription. Then 24 hours, she's back on her feet doing just fine. When I got sick, there was a little lady had a private practice in her home. That's where I'd go over there. Avoid it because you couldn't get good health care out of it. Had to pay extra. And I'm not saying that to go on a political stump speech this morning, but I think there's something when it comes to extra, because I think it would be a great idea if we could figure out how to do it. But at the same time, I don't think it should be the idea of this is my right, and I have the right to rob people in order to get my right. But that comes from kids who think that everything their parent don't understand. Mom and dad have things like donut sticks. Y'all thought that was just a random thing to talk about this morning. Like donut sticks. As a little bratty kid, I got digging through looking for something my dad had. Found my dad's donut sticks and thought, his donut sticks are my donut sticks. Right? I bear his name. Literally, other than a senior and a junior at the end. Anything he has surely is mine. And so I had some donut sticks. Till I found out later that is not the case. But isn't it sad, though, my dad felt like he had to hide them in order to have a treat for himself? And I remember when I first found, I was hurt. I can't tell you how hurt I was. My dad was hiding donut sticks from me. I felt so betrayed. Where was this bond between father and son? Where was the bond? Where was the loyalty? But you know what? My dad had every right. My dad had every right to have his own stash of donut sticks. They didn't have to share with his son. He had every right to it. Or my donut sticks, they were his donut sticks. I just thank God I was in a learning stage. Because not everything, it was a lesson I had to learn. Mom and Dad were allowed to have things that didn't belong to us, that we didn't have a right to, just because we were their kids. It was hard. It was a hard lesson to learn, especially when it came to donut sticks. But it was the truth. And I think it would be a good thing to come and learn. Not only in our relationship, do you understand? Even glory is something that belongs to the Father, not to you and me. The honor and the glory, and the power and the majesty all belong to who? The Father, not to us. But how many of God's children get upset because they don't get the glory for something that God did through them or for them? And they want a piece, just a piece. Well, God should share His glory and His power and His majesty with me. Really? Why would you rob God of His glory? Why would you rob God of His majesty? Why would you rob God of the adulation and the worship by sticking your nose in there and taking credit for something God did? Isn't it sort of robbing? Well, I'll tell you why we do it. We do it because we're hasting to get to a place that we want to get to. And snitching some of God's glory and snitching some of God's fame and snitching some of God's adulation and worship, guess what? That promotes us a little faster. But it's just because of the fact that we have a respect of persons. And we think people who are getting adulated, is that a word? Come on, my word people. That are getting adulated, it sounds like they're getting irritated. Or, you know what I'm saying? And we look at that and go, I wish I had that. Well, you know what? If I take some credit for what God's doing in my world, then maybe I can get that. Because after all, I obviously must be a very worthy vessel for God to do that. So I can at least take credit that I kept myself pure, and I kept myself holy, and I kept myself so sublime that God could look down upon the earth and say, oh, that is the only cup that I can possibly pour my wine of blessing into. Really? Isn't that kind of how we get sometimes, unfortunately, and people get? And we violate all those things. Why? Because that's what the impious do. God's not even protected from such rude behavior from His children, that they are willing to take from Him that which is His, and we are not worthy of, nor do we have any right to. And this is why it's important for kids to understand this, because if they don't, then when they do finally enter a relationship with the Lord, they got the wrong idea about the Lord and how that relationship works. Let's stop and we're going to pray. Father, thank you so much. I pray now, Father, that you will take the message and help people to understand it, help people understand the heart of it.